Hey everyone, John Fraser here. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know I'm a little obsessed with the blow lamp, the predecessor of the modern blowtorch, that dates back to at least the Italian Renaissance and remained wildly popular among glassworkers and chemists up into the 20th century. Despite doing my best to emulate the use of these tools, I've noticed, while reading historical accounts of blow lamp use, that the techniques and observations chemists and glassworkers mention all seem to describe a tool much more powerful than my own. In particular, the 19th century glassworking manual by T.P. Danger, entitled The Art of Glassblowing, describes getting glass to temperatures I just haven't been able to reach and performing operations I haven't been able to pull off. It's clear there's something I'm missing. In this video, I'd like to try to find out what that is. First things first, I'd like to make a new lamp out of some scrap copper pipe. It's possible all I need to succeed is more fire. The larger the lamp, the larger the fire. Danger says a 1-inch diameter wick is typical of the glassworking lamps of his day, and Michael Faraday echoes this in his description of lamp work in his book Chemical Manipulation. That's twice the diameter of my previous largest lamp. To make such a large lamp, I'm going to need a few pieces of copper plate, and I'm going to anneal all of them to make them workable. Because surface area increases exponentially, despite being only twice the diameter of my previous lamp, this new lamp's wick will actually be around 3 to 4 times the size of my previous lamp. These large wicks are made of bundles of smaller wicks. My previous lamp had 5 quarter-inch wicks in a bundle. This one will probably have closer to 20 quarter-inch wicks in a bundle. To be perfectly honest, I've been hesitant to build such a large lamp in the past, as it seems insane and like a fire hazard. Because it is. However, I'd like to see if the larger lamp actually makes a difference. In theory, with such a big fire, there's much more energy available. However, actually tapping into that much energy isn't necessarily as easily said as done. The human body can only be made to exhale so much oxygen at any given time. The large lamp should give us an abundant amount of potential energy, but only if we're able to supply enough oxygen will that potential be realized. And then, even if we are able to get enough air to the flame without asphyxiating ourselves in the process, focusing such a large flame into a jet without wasting most of the flame's energy to the surroundings poses yet another challenge. Danger makes it clear in his writing that the blow lamp can be a somewhat finicky tool, and he describes multiple mistakes aspiring glassworkers can make that lead the lamp to being functionally useless. Were he around today, he could probably quickly point out all of my mistakes and remedy them with ease, but without him, I'm left to guess whether my mistakes are in my designs, my materials, my techniques, or all three. A manual, while an incredibly valuable source, is really no replacement for a human teacher. When I use a tool that is still popular today, like any of my saws or chisels, plenty of talented and knowledgeable people can pick out everything I'm doing wrong and comment about it, making it clear that the limits of my ability do not indicate the limits of the tool. Whereas with a tool like the blow lamp that has fallen out of use in its historical capacity, it would be all too easy for the limits of my ability to be interpreted as the limitations of the tool. Sometimes I swear I can almost hear Danger's ghost shouting at me in French from beyond the grave, pointing out the obvious mistakes I'm oblivious to, and getting increasingly furious that I've repeatedly mispronounced his name as Danger in my previous videos. Despite the difficulties I've had in reproducing Danger's success, I think more than anything what keeps bringing me back to the topic of the blow lamp is that along with just being a handy tool to have around, the blow lamp's importance to humanity is hard to overstate. It's one of those tools that bridges the gap between the ancient world and the modern one. The more I learn about them, the more I feel indebted to them for their role in our history, and the more eager I am to see a living example do everything the sources indicate it can, and really reflect the usefulness it had to the humans that made use of it. The more examples of blow lamp use I stumble across, the more this really seems to hit home. The lamp quickly became a widespread tool indispensable to a wide variety of makers across history. As I said at the outset of this video, the earliest known accounts of blow lamp use appeared during the Italian Renaissance, in the centuries leading up to the scientific revolution. While its influence on the Renaissance glass industry is interesting to say the least, it was really in the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries where the lamp would make a name for itself. Regardless of whether it was worked at the lamp or blown with a more traditional glassworking furnace, glass itself as a medium is inextricable from the scientific revolution, making up everything from the lenses of Galileo's telescopes to the dome of Otto von Guericke's vacuum chamber, and of course the countless measuring instruments invented in these 2 centuries. It's not hard to see why. Glass is probably the perfect medium for scientific devices. It's relatively chemically resistant, it's airtight, it can handle high temperatures without melting or burning, and most importantly, it's transparent. Being that science is fundamentally based on observation, being able to actually see what's happening during an experiment is crucial. One instrument of particular importance that I'm sure we all know well is the thermometer, whose predecessor, the thermoscope, is often attributed to none other than Galileo, though its invention is a little hazier than that, and it appears that a few people made similar devices all around the same time. Middleton and Knowles' book, The History of the Thermometer and its Use in Meteorology, gives a thorough account of the instrument's invention, which I'll link to below. The explanation behind it being invented around the same time by multiple different people is that they all probably got the idea from the same place, an ancient Greek book that had only recently been translated into Italian. The book in question was none other than Hero's Pneumatica, a manual describing the construction of all sorts of air and steam-powered devices, written by the inventor Hero of Alexandria, likely in the 1st century of our era. One of the devices Hero describes in his book, which is likely the one that caught the imagination of folks like Galileo, was a solar-powered fountain, a metal sphere that, when placed in the sun, spouted water from within it. Either Galileo Galilei or his colleague at the University of Padua, Centurio Centuri, appear to have built a modified version of Hero's solar fountain out of glass. When a glass bulb at the end of a long tube was heated, the air inside it would expand, gradually pushing out water held inside the tube. Because this new version of Hero's device was transparent, it was possible to tell that the length of water expelled from the tube corresponded to the temperature of the bulb. The accounts of this demonstration are very limited, so it's hard to tell how the device was made and with what tools. However, one of Galileo's close friends, Giovanni Francesco Segredo, became enamored with this device and built his own. We know about this because letters from Segredo to Galileo survive. Segredo tells us that he developed Galileo's instrument into many new designs, meant specifically for measuring temperature. He writes in one letter that his instruments are made by himself at the lamp. In this way, Segredo, Galileo, and Centurio all seem a little like 16th century Steve Moulds, taking strange devices and reproducing transparent versions out of glass in order to better understand how they work. The blow lamp gave Segredo, a man who was by no means a professional glassblower, but rather a mathematician, the ability to experiment and fine-tune the design of his thermoscope by himself in his own home. This accessibility the blow lamp offered, combined with the virtues of glass as a medium, meant for a bit of an explosion in the invention of glass instruments that would continue well into the modern period, with many philosophers and scientists claiming their own unique designs for staple devices. I think this is well illustrated in Dangé's manual, which includes instructions for 8 different types of thermometers, 8 different barometers, 5 hydrometers, 2 thermoscopes, as well as instructions for all sorts of other instruments, such as pulsometers and manometers. Many of these instruments bear the name of their specific inventor, such as Gay-Lussac's barometer or Rumford's thermoscope. That all these instruments are listed in what's really only meant to be an introduction to lampworking suggests that the ability to create such a wide variety of instruments was considered more or less the expectation of any given lampworker. With the lamp itself finished, it's time to move on to making the blowpipe that will bring air to its flame. In a simple blow lamp, this is literally just a tube you blow through. But for our large lamp, this is going to have to be a slightly more complex device, which I'm going to carve out of a hunk of firewood. In chemical manipulation, Faraday advises us that large lamps sometimes call for multiple blowpipes to work effectively. So I'm going to carve air channels into this block to supply 3 blowpipes at once. In the genuine artifacts, like that at the Kerning Museum of Glass, these air channels are carved into the table itself, and then brass blowpipes are inserted into the table. But because I want this to be a portable tool, I'm going to make it so that I can just clamp the block itself to any table with an ordinary hardware star clamp. To create the channels, the first thing I'm going to do is drill a primary air passage straight through the block from end to end. I don't have any drill bits long enough to go clean through, so I'm just going to drill halfway through on either side, doing my best to make the holes meet in the middle. Next, I'm boring out 3 secondary holes through the top of the block. These will be where the blowpipes are inserted. A bit of tape on the drill bit tells me when I've reached the primary passage and can stop drilling. Now a bit of dowel glued into the far end of the primary passage will plug that end up, forcing all the air through the 3 secondary passages. Just like my last blowpipe, this blowpipe will incorporate Danger's air reservoir system, what he calls the continuous current blowpipe. All this calls for is a one-way valve and a place to stick a balloon or bladder. So I augured out the open end of the primary passage to make room for the valve in that end. Then on the bottom of the block I drilled one final hole. This is where the balloon that acts as the air reservoir will be attached. It's possible such a large lamp will require something like a foot-operated bellows or another air supply to work. Both Danger and Faraday describe such a bellows as being built into glassworking tables, and an artifact lampworking table at the Kerning Museum of Glass has just such a built-in bellows. The Kerning Museum has made some phenomenal videos of this table at work, which I'll link to down below for those interested in seeing an artifact example. That said, Danger doesn't treat the bellows as a necessity, and instead places extra emphasis on the use of the continuous current blowpipe. So that's how I'll proceed for now. Another little piece of wood joined to the block will give me a convenient spot to clamp the blowpipes down. It's important the blowpipes be very stable, as the more stable they are, the steadier my jet of flame will be, and the more constant a heat I'll be able to produce. To get an idea for the amount of heat we should be able to expect from this lamp, Danger tells us that as a general rule of thumb, the blow lamp shouldn't have any trouble working a tube of glass as wide in diameter as the wick itself, with walls 1/12 of an inch thick, or a little over 2 millimeters. Typically, I believe he uses soda-lime glass, but he also describes using flint glass and other types of glass that were available at the time. For my purposes, I'm going to presume the descriptions of his operations are based on soda-lime glass, unless he states otherwise. Throughout the book, Danger describes the temperature the glass is supposed to reach for each operation through the color it glows in the fire during that operation. with descriptive words like dull red or cherry red. This should give us a pretty accurate gauge for the temperature he's working at, as the color a material incandesces pretty faithfully reflects the temperature of that substance. From what I can tell, the most heat-intensive operation he describes is blowing bulbs, which entails melting the end of a tube into a lump and blowing it up into a nice spherical shape, which he insists should be done outside of the lamp flame while the glass is still hot. Confusingly, however, he describes the color the glass should glow for blowing bulbs as reddish-white. I'm not totally sure what he means by reddish-white, but I'm going to guess it's somewhere between cherry red and orange, maybe a sort of salmon color, which should correlate to around 850 degrees centigrade, over 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. This would make perfect sense, as it's well above the softening point of soda lime glass, but below its melting point. All of this together means that we should expect to be able to take the end of a 1-inch diameter soda lime tube to around 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit without too much trouble. This gives us at least something to work off of, but unfortunately, he leaves out one crucial detail. He doesn't tell us how long it should take to get the glass to temperature. Without knowing that, I can still only really guess if my lamp approaches his lamp's performance. In chemical manipulation, Faraday tells us that the individual blowpipes should connect to the table through sliding joints, which I imagined to mean a sort of telescoping joint between closely fitting pipes. These should probably be turned on a lathe to a close fit, but I just soldered in some bushings, which seemed good enough to me. These will allow me to adjust the position of each nozzle, hopefully making it easier to make a clean jet. I'm making the blowpipes themselves in the exact same way I made my previous blowpipes, a fine copper tube intersecting another tube around half an inch or so from the end, with the extra length acting as a spit catch at the end of the tube, just as Faraday describes. One problem I encountered was that I wasn't sure how large the blowpipe orifice should be. To start, I'll be using these 0.6mm 3D printer nozzles. Danger lists nozzle sizes corresponding to wick diameter, but doesn't tell us if the nozzles should be smaller when using multiple blowpipes or not, or how many blowpipes should be used at all. It's possible that means I'll only need one, but I really wasn't sure. After all, the example at the Kerning Museum of Glass has 5 for a similarly sized lamp. With everything finished, it's finally time to test out the blow lamp. To set it up, I first just attach the balloon I'm using as an air reservoir to the bottom of the blowpipe. Then I just clamp the setup to the table and make sure it's nice and solid. Now to make the valve that will let me blow up the balloon without it blowing back at me, I just loosely stretch a piece of balloon latex across a cork and jam it in the blowpipe. I promise that someday I'll come up with a better valve, but of everything I've tried so far, this is still the best. I spent a little while adjusting the pipes to get something of a jet. The flame looked more or less like that from the Kerning Museum of Glass, which was promising, but it also didn't exactly look great, and the 3 pipes certainly interfered with each other's streams. Using it to heat a glass tube made it clear the lamp worked, but I wasn't exactly blown away by the performance. It honestly felt like it was significantly weaker than my smaller lamp, which took me by surprise. Swapping in my smaller lamp, I confirmed that, sure enough, the smaller one got the glass much hotter, much faster, with a single pipe, as opposed to the larger lamp with all 3 pipes. Not to mention, it was much easier on me, as it required far less air to do so. After trying the larger lamp with 1 blowpipe and finding it could hardly make a jet at all, I switched over to 2 blowpipes and found that worked at least somewhat better than 3, and seemed to be closer to the small lamp in ability. This still isn't very good though. After all, I should be expecting something much stronger than the small lamp, given how much more fuel this large lamp uses. On my previous videos, some people have commented saying the moisture in my breath is probably holding back the ability of the flame, which makes perfect sense to me, as even a very small amount of water vapor can sap a surprising amount of energy from a flame. If glass workers like Danger were relying on a foot bellows, that wouldn't have been a problem for them, so I figured I'd quickly throw together a little air supply using an old bike pump, just to see if that makes the flame any hotter. Obviously, because it's hand-operated, it will be much less convenient than my breath for actually using the tool. But all I want right now is to see if the air supply actually makes a difference in the power of the flame. Despite the difficulty in using it, it's clear the fresh air does make the flame more powerful, though it's still not powerful enough to make the larger lamp worthwhile. I decided to switch back to the nozzle problem, and made a new blowpipe with interchangeable nozzles, which on rereading I noticed Danger actually says the nozzles should be interchangeable like this. It was while playing with this that I had my forehead slapping moment. As it turns out, the best nozzle is no nozzle at all, and the larger lamp makes a beautiful and powerful jet when blown on with the millimeter aperture of the tube itself. This new jet looks quite a lot like the jet of the smaller lamp, only it's about twice as long and emits a frankly scary amount of heat. In case you're wondering, I have a fire extinguisher within arm's reach. Unfortunately, this breakthrough didn't solve all my problems. The wide tube runs the air reservoir empty much faster than when it's restricted with a nozzle, and it's clear the system doesn't have enough pressure to keep the flame constant when I'm not blowing, making the flame inconsistent and hard to heat anything with. Luckily, both Danger and Faraday have advice for us when this is the case. They say to increase the pressure of the system, you can either just apply pressure to it with your legs, or add weights to it to increase the pressure passively. I found that I couldn't easily do either of these with my little balloon, so I decided to make a leather air reservoir similar to a bellows. One of the reasons a consistent flame is so important is because the maximum heat of the flame only occurs in one small area of the torch. To work glass, Danger and Faraday both insist it needs to be kept in that maximum heat zone, or you won't get very far. What I found with the inconsistent pressure is that maximum heat zone kept shifting, with me chasing it back and forth, all the while getting more and more exhausted from the increased demand for air. I was surprised by how similar inflating the leather reservoir was to inflating the balloon, and though it certainly took some getting used to, it was clear it provided much more pressure more consistently than my balloon. Because I'm applying this pressure with my knees rather than with the balloon's passive elasticity, you can see the pressure drops to nothing every now and then when I fall out of step with it. What I found most interesting about this, however, was that beyond the added pressure just making the flame more consistent, it also made it more powerful overall, forcing the flame into a tighter jet than it had been in previously. It's clear my previous setup had just been lacking adequate pressure. After recognizing this, I decided to give the balloon another shot, but this time I doubled up the balloons, with one inside the other, to try to increase the strength of their elasticity. I found this to work really well, providing a significantly higher pressure than the single balloon, and gave it a test by melting together a few grams of silver for use in an upcoming alchemy video. The torch had no problem, and it was starting to become clear to me that I was approaching my goal. Going back to the glass, it was clear the lamp now had all the power it needed to work the tubes, getting the glass up to a working temperature rapidly after entering the flame. The only issue is that between the high demand for air and the high pressure I'm now fighting against to blow into the setup, I was getting exhausted quickly. I could hardly pay attention to the glass at all, with the amount of work going into just keeping the reservoir full. It's possible someone well-trained with circular breathing wouldn't have much of a problem with this, but for me, it was just too much, and I felt winded after only a few minutes. I think running the lamp like this really calls for a foot bellows or another air supply. Though it may not exactly be historically accurate, for the sake of seeing what it would actually be like with another air supply, I hooked up a portable air mattress inflator with a foot switch to the setup. Removing my poor respiratory system from the equation turned out to be the right idea, and was the final thing I needed to make everything work like a charm. I thought I'd give a shot at making one of Segredo's thermoscopes. It should be one of the simplest things I can do to start out with and just requires blowing a bulb at the end of a narrow tube. I'm a total novice at glasswork and the medium certainly has a bit of a learning curve to it, but it wasn't too long before I had a sort of wobbly little thing blown. Not pretty per se, but I think it'll work for a thermoscope. To make this thing tell the temperature, all I have to do is gently heat up the air inside the bulb. As the air inside gets hot, it will expand quite a bit, and most will escape out the open end of the tube. Then I just stick that open end in a little vial of water, which will prevent any air from flowing back in. As the bulb cools and the air contracts, it sucks water from the vial up into it. Once the air in the bulb is back to ambient temperature, the water level halts its ascent. If the bulb gets any colder, the water level will start climbing higher again, and if it gets any warmer, the water will be pushed back down a little ways. Though I'm a big fan of my little thermoscope, the fact that it's such a small instrument means it wasn't much of a test of the lamp's capabilities, so next I'd like to try a larger object. Danger suggests this lamp can work tubes as wide as an inch in diameter, but my widest soda-lime tubing is only around half an inch, so I'll try to make something with that. As a big chemistry nerd, one of the objects in Danger's manual that caught my eye was the glass retort, a simple distillation apparatus made of a single piece of glass. Just like the thermoscope, the retort is essentially just a bulb at the end of a tube, but this time the bulb has to be substantially larger in order to function as a flask for holding the liquid to be distilled. Rather than just form one large sphere, I'm going to blow a series of 3 spheres and then merge them all together to make one oblong flask. That way I can make a larger flask without letting the walls get too thin. Once I'm happy with my little flask, all I need to do is put a bend in the tube to form the retort's distinctive curved neck that guides the vapors of distillate down to the receiver, and gives the vessel its name. This is honestly trickier than it sounds, and my retort's neck ended up a little twisted, but I can't help but feel elated to see the lamp actually produce a glass object this way. I pinched off the retort to give it a tight beak and filed off the end to open its aperture back up. I don't really have anything in mind for such a little retort at the moment, but I figured it would make a fun little desk piece for the time being, and the little thing has no problem pulling the alcohol out of a few milliliters of wine. Though my glassworking skills are certainly lacking some refinement, the performance of the lamp has really gotten me excited. I finally think I've got the thing to match the capability of the instrument Danger describes. So with that, I'm going to end this video here. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. This one has been a bit of a serpentine road and ended up taking far longer than I had anticipated. But I know a number of people here have come to appreciate these lamps as much as I have, and I hope you all will find this video helpful. That said, I'm sorry for staying quiet so long, as it's been an exciting few months for the channel, and I'm absolutely blown away by the community growing up around it. I promise I've got multiple videos wrapping up soon, and I'm excited to say we've just recently passed 65,000 subscribers, which is incredible, especially considering that I still have yet to upload the workshop tour I was planning for the 1,000 subscribers special. I can't tell you how grateful I am to all of you for your support and your patience, and if you have any ideas for the 10,000 and 50,000 subscriber specials, please let me know in the comments. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or corrections, feel free to comment below. Your feedback is always helpful in making these videos better, and this community is really what makes making these videos fun.